Welcome to the Daily Boogie.
Okay, let's shift gears. Time for
The Weekly Stelter.
We've got a double up for you. This should be fun. Trevor Noah, ladies
Is
and
this starting to feel like home for you now that it's been a few years?
I think it's felt like home for a while now, and I think home has been less defined by the space and more the people. I think were it not for the Trump presidency, it may have taken me a lot longer to feel like this was home.
And in the first few months of the Trump presidency, I know your writers and you all were scrambling to redo the show at the last minute. Is that still happening 16 months in?
Yes, but we don't scramble anymore. Now we expect it.
Now you plan for it.
Right, so now we plan for the unplannable. We wait for the...
I just want that to that can't be allowed to just go through to the catcher. Trevor Noah, that should be the headline. Trevor Noah praises Donald Trump for making him feel at home.
Were it not for the Trump presidency, it may have taken me a lot longer to feel like this was home.
There you go.
And in the first few months of the Trump presidency,
Donald Trump, the great race-hating divider, the KKK sympathizing bullshit motherfucker in the White House, bringing people together, making brown immigrants feel at home. Isn't that just a lovely, lovely story? Thank you, Donald Trump.
I know your writers and you all were scrambling to redo the show at the last minute. Is that still happening 16 months in?
Yes, but we don't scramble anymore. Now we expect it.
Now you plan for it.
Right, so now we plan for the unplannable. We wait for the moment when Wolf Blitzer goes, breaking news! We're waiting for that moment because it happens almost every single day. It's the 5:30 curse, we call it.
The
And
5:30.
He's on CNN and he says, all we do now as writers is wait for Wolf Blitzer to tell us something. Hey! I mean, these guys are creative geniuses down there at the Noah Show.
Curse.
Yeah, it's the
No wonder they feel at home.
5:30 curse. Around 5:30 every single day, that's when the news will break.
The news about Michael
Yep.
Cohen getting payments from companies,
Oh,
it did
yeah.
break between 5 and 6 p.m. this
Right.
week. You said Cohen's literally selling swamp tours.
Right.
Did it surprise you?
No, it didn't. I said from the very beginning that Donald Trump reminds me of an African dictator. And if you know anything about African dictators, the first thing you have to do is follow the money. And you follow the money
Yep.
with the people closest to them. Family members.
Trump reminds me of an African dictator. There he goes. He's transcending race once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is fantastic stuff from Trevor Noah. This is enlightening. This is progress. This is truth. This is the way forward. Thanks to Donald Trump, I felt at home almost instantly when I came to America, and Donald Trump reminds me of an African. Don't you see? Donald Trump is the great uniter. He loves brown people just like he loves the poorly educated. Loves them all. Trump reminds me of an African dictator. So then, you know, like Black Panther 2, Donald Trump's going to be in it. Donald Trump will be the king of Wakanda. I think it's fantastic stuff. I want to thank Trevor Noah for being so candid and honest.
Business associates, all you do is watch for the money. And I
Watch
would
for the
have been
money.
disappointed had we not found out, or had Michael Cohen not done this. I'm like, yeah, this is following the script. This is what...
James says, so since the South African dictators are killing white people, is that what our future looks like? No, 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 you've got that all wrong. You've got that all wrong. What's happening in South Africa right now is a process of progress. That's what I've coined it. I mean, you know, progress is tough for a lot of people. And it's usually the racists and the bigots who oppose it the most. And remember, sometimes you have to use, thanks to Lamont Hill on Don Lemon's show, sometimes you have to use, you know, unconventional language to ensure that everybody benefits from progress. And, you know, a few hacked up farmers on the plains of South Africa isn't gonna stop the progress train. And you know what? Only a racist would say it is, to be honest. I mean, you know, be less racist, James, obviously. Take a tip from Trevor Noah, you know. Just feel at home. He feels, that's the other thing, he feels at home with a president who reminds him of an dictator. Whoops.
You were meant to be doing as the person who rolls with Donald Trump. You were always going to be finding a way to...
I mean, obviously, America right now is like a horrible place to live. Obviously, for people of all colours and immigrants and ethnicities and the like, obviously. Because they feel right at home as soon as they get here. I mean, it's clearly like fracturing society. It's falling apart at the seams. All the Nazis and the KKK, ladies and gentlemen. Those alt-right motherfuckers taking over the world.
Swindle cash. And now the question really that remains is, did Trump know? And did these companies really not get anything? Because I feel like that's a quick way for the story to just disappear. Yeah, we paid and we didn't get anything. Let's move along. Let's move on.
When you say follow the money, you sound just like a journalist. It sounds like you bring that idea to this.
Well, he's a journalist.
As a person who processes information in the world, good journalists help you think of how to process a story. I think as a critical thinker, you should be able to do these things beyond journalism. You know,
unless you're Kanye West, then you're not allowed to think critically, because you'd be the alt-right darling. Remember.
I think we should be trying to build a population of people that are looking at information, that are reading into information. People who are asking questions that go beyond what they just told.
Is that really what you want?
And where do you see your show fitting into that?
Well, it's always evolved, you know? When I started the Daily Show, I thought our purpose was just to make jokes about what was happening, because that's what the world
Lynn
felt
says
like.
it's why people are coming in droves, because everyone's so oppressed. Exactly. Everybody loves to be oppressed in America.
It was a benign existence under Barack Obama.
I
think as the world comes to change, our purpose in that world changes. And I think that happens not just because of the Daily Show, but because of how comedy changes in society, depending on what is happening to that society.
Yeah, comedy's never been better. Comedy's never been healthier in today's society. Haven't you noticed? Yeah, the comedy, it is just like through the roof. You know, they're so brave. They're taking risks every day. The Trump presidency resembles that. He resembles the oppressive, brutal regime of an African dictator. That's why you've got to be brave to jump up on stage and say that he's part of the KKK. I mean, it's comedy, ladies and gentlemen. Clearly. Brian Stelter's a great comedian.
So when society is experiencing a boon, or if it is a wonderful time for people to be alive and there's not much strife, I generally find the comedy will be benign, and it will be, you know, observational.
Oh, you're so edgy, Trevor. Trevor's edgy.
You know, really light in its touch. As things become scarier, as the world becomes less secure, as people question the security that they exist within, that's when comedy becomes more cutting, because in many ways it's the release valve to that fear or to that tension.
You have some...
that's really observably untrue. Because anybody with two brain cells to rub together will tell you that in the most oppressive regimes, the totalitarian regimes, the fascists, the hardline communists, the Stalinists and whatnot, people aren't really, telling edgy jokes about the government. The more dangerous this world gets, the more dangerous the comedy gets. No, really, it's the other way. It's the other way around. Have you ever heard of this guy's in comedy. He's heard the expression tough crowd. Yep. Tough crowd. Have you heard that? Like when nobody's laughing, when you're doing a bit, when you're doing a routine. Tough crowd. Yep. You know what makes a tough crowd? 50 years of communism. Try getting up there and tell, maybe everything was great in the Soviet Union with all those comedians going around telling jokes about God knows what. Anything except the government. Anything except communism. Those capitalist pigs. Those capitalist pigs are so fat, they eat 3 meals a day. Oh, Kimmy's back on the block train. That's alright. I won't hold it against you. So, yeah. Puppy Love has some fantastic comments. Ras Dustin, good to see you. In his old age, he now sees the waxing and waning of the comedy industrial complex. Don Craig, thanks for joining us. Let's carry on with Trevor Noah and his wacky, edgy comedy that challenges African dictators like Donald Trump.
Some of the same challenges that I have. There might be a dozen stories in a day about Trump or about politics. How do you go about deciding which are worthy of talking about?
Well, I break it down into categories. I go, what's newsworthy? What is interesting? What is entertaining? And what is original?
Yeah,
because
what's
I'm going to be
original?
on the Daily Show every single day of the week, 4 nights a week.
Yes! Woo! Oh, breaking headline, ladies and gentlemen. Trevor Noah says to Brian Stelter that he spends most of his time trying to come up with original comedy. Donald Trump is so racist. I mean, Donald Trump is so horny. Donald Trump is so dumb. Trevor Noah is so original.
It's nice to vary my material. It's nice to switch things up. I don't want
Yes.
my audience to tune in
Yeah,
every
he
day
switches things
and
up.
feel like they're hearing the exact same story. And so, you know, as much as I can do, I don't talk about Trump. You know, he makes it
as
extremely
much as I
difficult,
can.
as you know.
Makes it
you know,
difficult.
because he and I've heard from many people that he purposefully wants to be in the news. So it's difficult to avoid that when the person is the president of the United States.
I think we've had this debate privately. Maybe we should have it publicly. You think Trump will be reelected if he decides to run, right? You think he's going to be with us for a long time?
I think people underestimate how laser-focused Trump and his supporters are. I think people also underestimate how many people in America are willing to accept the adverse effects of Donald Trump as they pertain to the general discourse in America versus the economy and how people actually...
Breaking, late night comedy show host who tells jokes about why Donald Trump is so racist laments the state of the discourse, the political discourse in America. Likens Trump to African dictator. Laments the fact that people aren't more civil and intelligent when discussing politics. Love it.
feel
He
in their
knows
daily
irony.
lives. So it goes back to, you know, what Joe Biden was talking about, where he was saying affected versus offended. And that's what's happened with a lot of Americans. There are many people who go, I'm offended by Donald Trump, but I'm not actually affected by him. I think too many people take for granted the ability Democrats have to step in their own way and trip themselves at the finish line. I don't take any of that for granted.
All right, really hard last question. Do you have a favorite joke about the president?
I think my favorite joke that encapsulates how I
Do you have a
observe
favorite
and
joke
process the Donald
about
Trump
the president? This will make sense. This interview, Brian Stelter's questions will make sense during the next clip, trust me.
presidency is this. I wake up most days terrified at the notion that Donald Trump is the most powerful president in the world. I also wake up most days acknowledging that he's also going to make me laugh. And that's what's difficult for me, is that he's an emotional paradox. And I've come to
An
realize it's
emotional
like
paradox.
this. I think it's almost like there's an asteroid headed towards the Earth, but it's shaped like a penis.
Okay.
I think I'm going to die, but I know I'm going to laugh.
You're going to die laughing?
Could be both.
Okay. Wow. Whew. That was quite the rundown there from Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah believes that racism is rife, but he felt right at home as soon as he got to America. He believes that Donald Trump reminds him of an African dictator, and that he resembles somewhat of a giant penis as an asteroid colliding with the Earth, and this provides him an emotional paradox. Great stuff. Deep. That's truth. All right. Let's see why Brian Stelter is addicted to Donald Trump.
I am a Trump addict. I think I'm willing to admit that. I think all roads lead to Trump right now.
See, this was the one moment that I've seen Brian Stelter actually be charming. I am a Trump addict. It's almost like Alcoholics Anonymous. I can just see Brian like in a tracksuit, in a room full of other guys with tracksuits. Yes, Denise, that was funny. If you don't laugh, you're a racist. Just letting you know, just giving you the tip. So yeah, Brian Stelter's in the room, drinking the free coffee, eating the free biscuits. I'm a Donald Trump addict. I've been addicted to Trump for a couple of years now. It's all I think about. It's all I talk about. Help me. Help me.
I am a Trump addict. I think I'm willing to admit that. I think all roads lead to Trump right now. But you pointed out in a recent column
Our
that
addiction
could be
to
a problem.
Trump.
How so?
So, I mean, and let me express my own addiction as well. You know, my wife and I, we find ourselves, our pillow talk is sometimes about Trump.
Oi! Pillow talk about Trump. Kimmy says, just the tip. We have pillow talk about Donald Trump, my wife and I. You know, when I need to get in the mood. Don't you just love it? See, here's the other thing too. People like Brian Stelter or Christoph from the New York Times would never admit that Donald Trump lives in their head 24/7. Have you ever heard that expression? I'm living in his head. They're like, Donald Trump's so irrelevant that I have to talk about him with my wife at 1 a.m. while we gaze into each other's eyes in bed. Donald Trump is so irrelevant, I'm addicted to it. They love him. Deep down, they love him. They know they love him. I mean, if they didn't like him, then they just wouldn't care. They wouldn't talk about him at all. And on for truth. Thanks for joining us. Denise says, wow, these people are strange. Glad I don't have a TV. Daniel says he wears the Trump wig to shag his wife. Look out, baby. There's an orange tsunami heading your way.
But,
terrible.
But I do think that we have to acknowledge that there is so much more happening in the world than Donald Trump.
Wow,
and
finally.
we in the media are essentially...
Slow clap. There are other things happening in the world besides Donald Trump. You don't say. You don't say. What are we, like 16 months in? Thereabouts? 15 months? 16 months? You know, even though I talk with my wife about Donald Trump nightly as we lay our heads upon our warm pillows and gaze into each other's eyes before we drift off into the arms of Morpheus, I can't help but think, maybe there's something else going on in the world. I can't help but wonder. Jeez. I am in the news business. Maybe I should cast a broader net. But then I remember all those KKK mother effers and this bullshit mother effer who praises the alt-right who's living in the White House, and I remember I've got a mission.
All Trump all the time. And frankly,
all Trump all the time.
It's rude to say this, but I think cable television is particularly true of cable TV.
It is, yeah.
And the upshot is that we risk not covering a lot of really important things at home and around the world. And we complain that President Trump is parochial, isn't paying attention to important things around the world, and we're absolutely right. But that can also be said about us.
Well, there's always been a critique of
Pardon me. Donald Trump is too parochial. As the American president, he's not paying enough attention to other things going on in the world. We say that, and we're right, but neither do we. Takes one to know one. With all of this Trump addiction, I'm surprised they even find time to cover things like, you know, the skirmishes in the Golan Heights. Oh yeah, that was like 3 days later. We got around to that. We had to have Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' lawyer, on for the 4th time today. We had to cover it. We had new developments in the Avenatti case, in the Stormy Daniels case, that we just had to get to post haste. I mean, we'd love to cover other things going on in the world, but I mean, yeah, Avenatti's got he's got a ticket for parking and it expires in 2 hours, so we can't, you know. I mean, I'm not shelling out. I'm not shelling out for Michael's Ferrari down there.
The American press, that it's too focused on politics, Washington inside baseball, and not focused enough on real-world
Crystal
issues
says
that
Trump
affect
sets
communities.
constant bait for
And
the
I
fake
guess the
news.
point is that's even more true now because Trump sucks up all the oxygen.
I think that's part of it, and also I think, frankly, that there's obviously a crisis in journalism, and our old business model has been collapsing. And then along came Trump, and he's a bit of the solution to our business model.
See, they love him. Here's an admittance of failure. Our business model was failing. People stopped caring. Suddenly Donald Trump comes along and he is the solution. Donald Trump is the solution. There's a headline for you. Donald Trump, KKK sympathizer, Nazi motherfucker. Quote unquote, the final solution.
And then along came Trump, and he's a bit of the solution to our business model. As long as we have cameras focused on him, then audiences will follow.
Now, it's interesting that you said that. He brought up something similar at his rally a few days ago. Here's what he said.
Let's check him out.
So I said, unless they give me an extension for the presidency, which I don't think the fake news media would be too happy about. Wait. Actually, they would be happy, because when I'm not here, their ratings are going to sink.
Now, I don't think that's entirely true, but there is a Trump bump that we've seen in television ratings,
Trump
in
bump.
New York Times subscriptions,
Absolutely.
etc.
Trump bump. They
So
are in love with him.
I suppose on an individual and an institutional basis, we have to reckon with this.
Yeah, and I think we have to acknowledge it. You know, in 2016, frankly, I think we in the media, to some extent, blew a historic election because we were so relieved that there was somebody we could cover that would.
Oh! Well, howdy doody time. We in the media blew a historic election. We fucked up. We fucked up. Hillary should have won. It was her turn. We blew it. You know when people say, you're crazy, when you say things like the media was in the bag for Hillary Clinton and desperately wanted her to win? They're like, you're crazy. Here he is saying, no, we blew it. Sorry. Whoops. We blew it. We blew a historic election. Donald Trump's election wasn't historic. Like that will just be, like tearing down statues. When you go through history books 50 years from now, and it says 2016 to 2020 and potentially 2024, there'll just be an asterisk. No record recorded. No president recorded. During these years, there was no president. There was just a Nazi KKK mother effer in the White House. Welcome to Common Core history. Breaking. Media admits they blew it by not getting Hillary elected. Don't you just love this? Don't you love it? Brian Stelter, ladies and gentlemen. Where the truth comes out. Reliable sources.
Historic election because we were so relieved that there was somebody we could cover that would generate these subscriptions. And then as you remember, there was some anxiety in newsrooms that then Hillary Clinton was going to be elected and government would be boring again and our audiences would desert us. Well, I mean, that did not happen.
Even Brian can't go along with that. Christoph says, if you'll remember, there was anxiety in newsrooms at the thought of Hillary getting elected, and then suddenly politics would become boring again. And Stelter's like, I didn't have that kind of anxiety. Look at the reaction.
Again, and our audience was deserted.
One more time. One more time, because it's very exaggerated. He had to make it clear that he didn't think that.
Government would be boring again, and our audiences was desert us. Well, I mean, that did not happen.
Isn't this really about
It's
proportionality?
like a mime.
Here's part of the column you wrote. I'm not arguing that we avert our eyes from Trump or mute our criticism. Far from it. But we have to figure out how to spare bandwidth for the genocide in
Sounds a
Myanmar,
bit like Paul Lynn
opioids
says
in America, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're focused on one conflict, which is basically the Washington conflict. And that's important, and we've got to cover that. But there are all these others out there as well.
Yes.
And that I don't
Lots
think
of
we're
conflicts.
adequately covering those, and for very understandable reasons. If it's easy for me to write this as a columnist, because I'm far enough the game. I can write columns that only my mother will read, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
if I were executive producer of a TV show, I can understand that if I sent a camera crew off to Myanmar to write about the genocide against the Rohingya, then my audience is going to drop compared to a rival network that puts a Democrat and a Republican in a studio together and has them yell at each other. And that's a real problem. And I don't really have a solution to that.
You also wrote in the column, quote, the
Americans need to know more about the genocide in Myanmar than they do about Republicans and Democrats yelling at each other. That's a problem, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you love that? Don't you love that? Don't you love this guy who writes for the New York Times saying, he's saying that there's an addiction problem with Donald Trump, like the media is addicted to Donald Trump, and that's a problem. And then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that is kind of a problem because you guys are kind of weird about it. I mean, fuck, man, you're up in the middle of the night talking to your wife about it, pillow talk style. Like, please, that's a problem, right? It's a problem for you. It's not a problem for me. It's a problem for you. You should go to a counsellor. But put that to one side. That's not the only problem. The other half of the problem is you don't know enough about Myanmar. Mike Hamill says, we like yelling. Who doesn't? Everybody likes yelling. Especially those KKK bigot alt-right motherfuckers in the White House. All of them. So that's the problem. You need to know more about Myanmar and less about your own government, your own political system. There seems to be a trend. The more people find out, the more people look past the CNNs and the New York Times. Here's the problem. Here's the real problem. The more people look past the CNNs and the New York Times for their political understanding and their political research, guess what? This strange phenomenon happens. The less people watch CNN and read the New York Times. I mean, it's freaky. It's like, what is it? Inversely proportional. Brian, we have a serious problem here in the serious news media. It seems that the more people research for themselves, the less that they read the New York Times. Yes, I can see that's a problem. We are addicted to Donald Trump, though. We give him plenty of the good stuff. What was it, like 96% negative stories? I don't know. I don't know why no one's watching.
biggest Trump scandals aren't those unfolding in Washington, but those devastating the lives of poor and vulnerable people in distant American towns.
Okay.
Again, that's harder to cover, and the resources are not always there.
Donald Trump is devastating the lives of Americans in small towns.
But I really like the way you frame the scandal, the real scandal, being outside Washington.
That's right. I mean, I come from a part of Oregon that has that is indeed pro-Trump, in part because it did get neglected and because there has been a real crisis. American life expectancy has gone down 2 years in a row, whereas in the rest of the industrialized world, it's gone up. And if this were happening because of terrorism, we'd be all over it. But it's happening in really boring, non-dramatic ways, through suicide, alcohol abuse, through drugs, because of a crisis in work, a crisis in self-esteem, a crisis in employment, in living standards, and
that all just started when Donald Trump became president, by the way. Before that, when Obamacare was rocking and rolling, everybody was happy. There was no opioid crisis. Everyone was working. There was full employment and no drug use. The real tragedy of the Donald Trump presidency is all the people who are disillusioned and addicted to drugs. Yep, there's your legacy, bigot. Stamp that on his big orange forehead. Hey? Donald Trump, architect of the opioid crisis, Nazi KKK sympathizer, subject of my pillow talk and horny chat.
I think we have kind of dropped the ball on that.
Dropped the ball.
And it helped elect President Trump, I believe, and I think in turn his policies are going to magnify that problem.
What a thought that if these people were dying from terrorism, there'd be wall-to-wall coverage right here. But because it happens in the shadows, one at a time, it's almost invisible to us.
Yeah, and that invisible America, if you will, I think is one that, because we don't cover...
Invisible America. You mean the space between LA and New York? The space filled with all of those deplorable racists that you hated last week? Is that invisible America?
...it adequately because we don't talk about it. We don't develop good policies to address it. I think that as a nation, we tend to have our worst policies towards issues that are difficult to talk about or that are invisible. We can be part of the solution. We can help leverage these issues and, you know, put them on the agenda. And it's hard, and we have to figure out how to build a business model for that kind of thing. But maybe a starting point is to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, that would be a pretty good starting point, I imagine. Having a conversation. As opposed to just yelling at everyone.